I woke to the soft gray light filtering through the sheer curtains, the kind of morning that feels heavier than the night that came before. My eyes fluttered open, expecting the usual emptiness of my apartment. Instead, I froze. There, on the edge of my bed, curled in a way that made him seem smaller, calmer, yet impossibly intimate, was Malik. His chest rose and fell with quiet rhythm, the soft hum of his breathing filling the room in a way that made the silence almost unbearable. For a long moment, I simply stared, unsure whether to wake him or pretend I had never noticed. My mind raced, a chaotic loop of disbelief, guilt, and a strange, undeniable curiosity. How did this happen? And more importantly, why? I remembered the previous evening, a normal night, or so I thought. Malik had been helpful, organized, unobtrusively charming, assisting me as he always did. His laughter, warm and easy, had punctuated the monotony of my apartment with something I didn't want to name. Yet, even then, there was a subtle weight behind his eyes, a look that lingered too long, a glance that carried something unspoken. And now, him here, so close, so unguarded that I swallowed, heart pounding. My hand twitched toward my phone, perhaps to call for some logical sense of control, but I stopped myself. Logic would not fix the muddled feeling twisting in my chest. I felt both intruder and voyeur in my own home, caught between wanting to wake him and wanting to vanish into the sheets and pretend it had never happened. Malik shifted slightly, murmuring in his sleep. His expression softened, the tension around his jaw easing, a brief glimpse of vulnerability that made my chest tighten. Vulnerability. Was that the word? Or was it something more, something I wasn't ready to confront? I rose carefully, not wanting to disturb him. The apartment was quiet, save for the distant hum of the city below, and the faint scent of the coffee I had left brewing before bed. The kitchen light cast long shadows across the hardwood floor, and I found myself pacing, struggling with the enormity of my thoughts that I couldn't help but reflect on the way things had been between us. Malik had been my assistant for nearly a year. Efficient, professional, unassuming to most eyes, but somehow, beneath his composed demeanor, there had always been a thread of connection I couldn't define. A hand lingering too long on a file, a joke that carried just the right note of personal familiarity, a smile that seemed to see something in me I had spent years hiding, even from myself, and now, he was here, sleeping beside me, a human presence I had never allowed to feel so close, and yet, here he was, as though it were entirely natural. My rational mind screamed about boundaries, about propriety, about the absurdity of this situation. And yet, my heart, my body, my very being, whispered something entirely different. That I thought of the mornings I had seen him across the office, moving with quiet precision, handling tasks I hadn't even realized needed attention. I remembered the way he had laughed when I had shared a story about my childhood, the light in his eyes that hinted at understanding and, perhaps, admiration. Was this what I had been feeling all along? A pull toward him I had carefully ignored. The room seemed to shrink around me, the quiet so dense it became almost tactile. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, but words felt clumsy, inadequate. Instead, I moved closer, inching toward the bed, careful to make no sound. I studied his features, the line of his jaw, the slight crease at the corner of his mouth, the way the light caught his dark hair. I had never looked at him like this, not really. Not as Malik, my assistant, my employee, but as someone real, someone complex, someone impossibly human. That I leaned against the wall, my mind spiraling. What would I do if he woke? If he looked at me with the same awareness I felt in that moment? Would he smile? Laugh it off? Or would the professional mask snap into place, leaving me stranded with the mess of my own feelings? My phone buzzed, startling me. A message from work, mundane, trivial, a reminder of the world outside this room, but I ignored it. Nothing outside mattered at that moment. Not the deadlines, not the meetings, not the obligations that usually ruled my life. All that mattered was this: Malik, here, sleeping, and me, standing, caught in a storm of thoughts I wasn't ready to name aloud. That I found a chair and sank into it, facing him, as though my eyes could speak for me. Time stretched, elongated by my indecision, until every sound became amplified, the soft tick of the wall clock, the distant siren, the faint rustle of Malik shifting in his sleep. And then he stirred slightly, half awake, murmuring something indistinct, his hand brushing against the sheets. My chest tightened in response, and I realized, perhaps for the first time, that my feelings for him were no longer abstract, no longer safe in the confines of imagination. They were real. That I closed my eyes briefly, taking a slow, deliberate breath. I told myself I could handle this. I would navigate it carefully, with thought and consideration. And yet, even as I made this mental promise, I knew that nothing would ever be quite the same. When I opened my eyes again, Malik had turned slightly, still asleep, but the corner of his mouth hinted at a smile, a secret that belonged only to him. And in that moment, I understood with terrifying clarity, the morning I had woken to find him beside me was the morning everything began to change. That I stood there for a long while, caught between fear and fascination, between desire and duty. And finally, with the decision to wait, to watch, to see how this unfolded, I left the room quietly, leaving him to his sleep, yet feeling the unspoken weight of what had just happened. Little did I know, that morning was only the beginning. The morning stretched longer than I anticipated. Malik had quietly left the room after I lingered near the doorway, leaving a faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air, a subtle, almost intoxicating reminder of his presence. I sat at the edge of the sofa, hands clasped, heart still racing from the disorienting wake-up. Thoughts swirled in my mind like a restless tide, pulling me in directions I wasn't ready to navigate. Eventually, I heard his soft footsteps returning, deliberate, cautious, as though he knew I was awake and was measuring each step for the impact it might have. He paused near the kitchen, hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored slacks, a quiet tension surrounding him. Malik had always carried himself with an easy confidence, but now there was a subtle hesitation in his movements, a vulnerability that tugged at something deep inside me. "Morning," he said, voice even, calm, but with a trace of something I couldn't place. Perhaps uncertainty. Perhaps hope. "Morning," I replied, my own voice sounding strangely foreign even to my ears. I realized I had been holding it in, words, questions, thoughts, but now, all that restraint seemed meaningless. That we moved through the apartment like careful dancers, avoiding each other's gaze at first. The coffee brewed quietly in the background, filling the space with warmth and normalcy, yet the tension remained, almost palpable. Malik poured himself a cup, his hands steady, deliberate, but the subtle tremor in his fingers betrayed his calm exterior. That I remembered the countless mornings we had shared like this before, professional, distant, courteous. Yet this morning was different. This morning carried weight. Layers of unspoken emotion hung between us, each gesture loaded with meaning I couldn't ignore. That I cleared my throat. "Malik, about this morning," my words faltered. I hadn't expected to speak first, yet now they were out, raw and trembling with uncertainty. He looked at me, head tilted slightly, eyes questioning but open. "Yeah." His simple response, neutral in tone, was anything but neutral in impact. Every inch of him seemed attentive, tuned to the slightest change in my demeanor. I stopped. The words I wanted to say felt both too heavy and too inadequate. "I don't know why I feel this way. I mean, this is unusual. For us." Malik's gaze softened, understanding without judgment. He set his cup down gently and walked a few steps closer, though still careful to respect the invisible boundary I had tried, unsuccessfully, to maintain. "Ethan, feelings don't always follow rules," he said quietly. "They don't always wait for the right time, or the right place." His honesty struck me like a sudden gust of wind. Vulnerability, yes, but also courage. Malik wasn't demanding, wasn't pressuring. He was simply acknowledging a truth I had been unwilling to face, that my emotions for him had shifted, subtly at first, then undeniable. That I remembered the little things, moments that had seemed insignificant at the time but now felt like signposts, the way he lingered when handing me files, the quiet attentiveness when I spoke of personal matters, his laughter that always carried warmth and understanding. Small gestures, almost invisible to the casual observer, but impossible to overlook in retrospect. I've noticed things," I admitted, voice low. "Little things. Things I told myself didn't mean anything. But now, my hands curled into fists in my lap, and I looked away, ashamed. Now I don't know how to ignore them. Malik gave a faint, knowing smile, but didn't press. You don't have to ignore them, he said simply. And you don't have to understand them all at once. His voice was gentle, yet firm, a balance of reassurance and patience. The room was quiet again, the coffee's aroma a faint reminder of mundane normalcy. But beneath the ordinary, the air between us was charged, layered with recognition, curiosity, and the potential for something neither of us could yet name. That I rose, pacing slowly, trying to untangle my thoughts. What's happening between us, I began, fumbling. It doesn't feel wrong, exactly. But it feels complicated. And I don't know how to reconcile that with everything else, work, life, expectations. Malik leaned against the counter, arms crossed but posture relaxed, as if waiting for me to continue at my own pace. Complicated doesn't mean impossible, he said, voice low, deliberate. But it does mean we need to be careful. Thoughtful. Honest. His words were a bomb and a spark all at once. They offered reassurance that I wasn't alone in this confusion, yet they reminded me that the path ahead would be far from simple. And beneath the rational warnings, a quiet thrill ran through me, danger, intimacy, discovery, all mixed into a single, disorienting emotion. That we moved slowly into the living area, sitting across from each other on the sofa. Distance, physical and emotional, suddenly felt too vast, yet neither of us bridged it completely. The tension hummed, palpable, as if waiting for permission to either dissolve or erupt. I've never felt this way before, I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Not for anyone. Not like this. The words hung between us, fragile yet undeniable. Malik's gaze softened. Neither have I, he confessed. But maybe, that's not the point. Maybe the point is simply that it's real. That we're real. And that's enough to start with. I felt a strange combination of relief and fear. Relief because someone I trusted, understood without judgment. Fear because understanding did not erase consequences. Understanding did not make choices any easier. That we sat in silence for several moments, letting the weight of the unspoken words settle. Each glance, each small gesture, carried more meaning than any conversation could. I realized then that our connection was deeper than mere attraction. It was an intricate weave of trust, familiarity, and unacknowledged desire. Finally, Malik stood, moving toward the door. I'll give you some space, he said softly. But I'm here. Whenever you're ready to talk again. I nodded, unable to speak, my mind spinning with possibilities and fears. The room felt emptier once he left, yet his presence lingered, like a shadow or an echo, pressing against the edges of my thoughts. As I watched the door close behind him, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: the morning had changed everything. And now, I had to decide whether to confront what was happening, or let it simmer, potentially forever. Little did I know, the choices I made next would determine the course of not only my day, but the fragile, tangled connection between Malik and me. The apartment was unusually quiet that afternoon, the kind of silence that feels heavier than sound. I had spent hours pacing, sitting, staring out the window at the city below, trying to untangle the storm of emotions that Malik's presence had stirred. Every thought circled back to him, his calm voice, the subtle gestures, the way he seemed to see through every carefully constructed layer I used to protect myself. Finally, I heard the soft click of the door, the careful rhythm of his steps. Malik entered, his posture relaxed yet attentive, eyes flicking toward me as if reading the indecision etched across my face. I rose to meet him halfway, though the distance I put between us felt like a chasm I wasn't sure I could cross. Ethan, he said softly, voice steady. You've been quiet. I've been thinking, I admitted. About us. About this. About everything. My hands twisted nervously in front of me. I don't know what the right thing is anymore. Malik studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There isn't always a right thing, he said. There's just what we're willing to face, together or apart. His words were careful, measured, but beneath them I sensed a thread of hope, fragile, tentative, yet impossible to ignore, that we moved into the living area, the same space where our previous confessions had begun. He sat across from me, close enough that the air between us felt charged, but far enough to allow breathing room. I noticed how he shifted slightly, a small, unconscious movement that mirrored my own tension. "I've tried to pretend," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "That there's nothing here. That it's just me imagining things. But I can't anymore. I feel something for you, Malik. Something I can't just push away." Malik's expression softened, and for a brief moment, I saw vulnerability, the same vulnerability I had glimpsed in him during the first morning, the same vulnerability that had drawn me in despite my own fears. "Ethan. I've felt it too," he admitted. "Long before this morning. I've just waited, hoping you'd see it too." The admission sent a jolt through me, a mixture of relief and fear. Relief because my feelings were not one-sided, fear because acknowledgement made the consequences unavoidable. Work, reputation, boundaries, everything suddenly seemed more fragile, more complicated. That I leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. "But what do we do now? How do we navigate this?" My voice cracked slightly, betraying the uncertainty I tried to mask. Malik's gaze never wavered. "We take it one step at a time," he said quietly. "We don't have to have all the answers right now. We just have to be honest with ourselves and each other." His words were both comforting and terrifying. Honest. That was the key. Honesty had been absent from so much of my life, from the relationships I had chosen, from the way I had shielded myself from connection. And now, honesty demanded courage, courage I wasn't sure I possessed. That I thought about the mornings, the afternoons, the countless small moments that had gone unnoticed until now. The way Malik had laughed at my jokes, the subtle attentiveness to my moods, the quiet support when I felt overwhelmed. Every gesture, every glance, had been a thread weaving us closer, a tapestry I had ignored until the first morning I woke to find him beside me. "I'm scared," I admitted finally, voice raw. "Scared of what this could mean, of what it could do to us, everything." Malik reached out, resting a hand near mine on the sofa, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him without crossing boundaries. "Fear doesn't mean we shouldn't try," he said. "It just means we need to be careful. Thoughtful. Present." We sat there in quiet, the hum of the city below serving as a distant reminder that life continued outside this bubble of tension and possibility. The space between us felt alive, electric, as if waiting for some silent signal to collapse into understanding or retreat. "I don't want to hurt you," I said, finally letting the words escape. "Or to be hurt. Or for this to ruin everything else." Malik's hand shifted slightly, brushing against mine in a deliberate, unhurried gesture. "Then we don't rush. We don't force it. We just acknowledge it. And see where it leads." His voice was calm, steady, reassuring. "Is that something you're willing to do?" I looked at him, at the quiet strength in his eyes, at the patience and care that had carried us this far. "Yes," I whispered. I think I am." A small, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. "Good," he said softly. "Because I'm willing to try too. With you." The room felt lighter then, the tension easing slightly, though it was replaced by an awareness of the choices that lay ahead. Decisions had to be made, boundaries set, emotions navigated with care, but for the first time, it felt like we were facing them together, rather than alone. Malik stood, moving toward the window, and I followed instinctively. We gazed out at the city below, silent but not apart, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the apartment floor. In that quiet, shared space, there was understanding, a promise, unspoken but undeniable, that whatever came next, we would confront it honestly. That I realized then that mornings like this were dangerous, unpredictable, but also filled with possibility. The connection between us was no longer subtle or ignorable. It existed, undeniable, and the only question remaining was how far we were willing to explore it, and what sacrifices we were prepared to make. Malik finally turned to me, a quiet question in his eyes, and I knew that whatever happened next would define not only our relationship, but the way we saw ourselves. And though uncertainty lingered, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a readiness to face the unknown. Together, that afternoon, the apartment no longer felt ordinary. It had become a space of possibility, of tension, and of fragile hope. And as Malik and I stood there, silent, connected, I understood that the first step had been taken. The story of us, our story, was beginning, uncertain, complex, and entirely ours. Little did I know, the decisions we made in the coming days would test everything we believed about ourselves and each other, and the bond we had begun to forge in silence would be challenged in ways we could never have anticipated.